Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Beyond Day One, the podcast. We're glad that you've joined us. I have to admit that I am a pretty heavy reviewer, observer, if you will, of LinkedIn. And so I read a lot of what people are posting, read some articles there, some of that kind of thing. And I came across an article earlier, and it was about being honest and telling the truth in the work environment. And that touched a chord with me because one of the things that's on my list of some of the critically important elements for Gen Z is the concept of honesty and truth in the workplace. But once again, just like so many things, we think that this is generational, but the reality is that most of our employees want to be treated with honesty and truth. And they just want you to be honest and tell them what's going on. And so today, I want to talk about that honesty and truth, especially in light of us having just talked about the concept of the transformational leaders showing how they care for their employees. To help me do that, I've got once again with me, I've got Ryan and I've got Philip joining me. Gentlemen, how are you tonight?
Good.
Doing good.
So we're here to talk about this concept of truth and honesty in the workplace. And of course, the old Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth, you know, comes
Yes.
to mind because I think that sometimes how we who are leading in the workplace kind of treat our team, our employees, and we act like they can't handle it. So we try all of these different things, you know, beating around the bush, kind of telling part of it, but not all of it, you know, being, as Ryan says, passive aggressive about it. And we do all of these things except sometimes being direct and honest with people, which, through my observation and what I've understood about people, is most people want you to be direct and honest with them. Then they can process and learn and handle whatever they've got to do to handle it within themselves. But they at least want you to tell them the truth. What are you guys thinking about that concept, and how are you even experiencing it in your own workplaces? How about you, Ryan?
Well, I've experienced enough passive aggressive leadership in the last decade. I could write a whole book about it. But I
Yes.
agree with you. I would much rather you be direct and honest with me. I had this one boss, and whenever there was a problem, like we would have before we would have great conversations in person. And everything was great and hunky dory and very relational and very personal. But then whenever there was a problem, he wouldn't tell me there was a problem until we were separated. Either he would go out of town on a trip, and then he would just inundate me with these text messages. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Or it'd be late at night, and he would text me. And it was never a phone call, it was never in person. And it really would ruin my whole day because because we had such a great relationship, I wanted to do a good job for him. And I asked him one time, I said, "Why do you do that?" And, he never really gave me a response, but I said, "Could you please not, if there's a problem, I want to know about it, but I also want to know the context of which you're telling me. And maybe you can understand where I'm coming from too a little bit better. Instead of texting me, at least call me and tell me that there's a problem. So that way we can understand the context and things don't get lost, because a lot of times things can get lost in translation in a text message. So to your point, David, I would agree with you. I think a majority of people, they want to do a good job. A majority of people want to be successful in the workplace. And a majority of people want to understand the context of which they are or are not doing a good job, or where they're doing great and where improvement is needed. But in order to do that, you have to have some direct and honest conversations.
Ryan, you said something in that is just maybe it's a pet peeve of mine, but it's the concept of communicating bad stuff by way of a text message.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it would
And
ruin
and I
it
I
would ruin
think there's, kind of, if there's a number one, there it is right there. That when we're dealing with, especially when we're dealing with hard things, when we're talking about dealing with them honestly And truthfully, we've got to know that a text message isn't going to serve the purpose. There may be a time when you have to communicate some things by a text message because of, there could, if you work remote, for example, that's even a hard one because you can get on a virtual call and have a direct conversation with people. I
Yeah.
think that there may be a time or two where you might need to use technology to text or communicate. But 9 times out of 10, I can't necessarily think of right off the bat, and you guys out there may be able to think of something for me of why you can't communicate directly with that person. One of the ways that uh, truth and honesty comes off with care is that you have, for lack of a better word, the guts to
Mm,
look them in the eye and tell them what it is. And that's good, better, and different. Because here's the thing, a lot of times we don't have a problem passing on good news to people face to face. We want to see their response. We want to gym it up a little bit, all of that good stuff. It's usually when there's something not good that's going on. And inevitably, Philip, people have a sense when things aren't going right, right? Either they know because they know the quality of their work isn't up to par, or they're in the office and you won't look me in the eye at all as you're walking by, all of that weirdness.
mhm.
Talk to me about that for just a little bit.
I think that all of us have, especially if you've been working in the corporate world or whatever for a good while, you've got you've developed some sense of a BS detector eventually. And and you can just kind of tell, like you said, when things aren't going how they're supposed to go, or you can maybe even tell that what you're doing isn't cutting it, or that maybe the supervisor, manager, whoever is not fully pleased with the job that's being done, whatever the case is. But of course, if they're not, like what Ryan was talking about, if they're not willing to be direct with you and say, hey, here's the problem, not making it personal, but saying, okay, these metrics aren't being met, whatever the case is, we need you to, you know, maybe approach it a different way, do something, to step up this pace of what you're doing, whatever the fix might be for that particular thing. I feel like most people want to hear that because at the end of the day, if they're hired to do a job and they want, a lot of people take pride in their work and value what they put out there. So if it's not meeting the standard, or if it's maybe not even close to what the expectations are, if nobody ever tells them, they're going to live in this weird kind of suspended animation between, okay, I'm doing this job, I'm putting forth effort, but then I'm not sure that it's even what they're asking for. So you don't want people living in that type of confusion and ambiguity. You want people to have clarity about how their performance is going by way of honest and direct feedback.
I love that, Phil. So let's just talk about a few ways. If we were to give some advice to leaders, um, what advice would we give to leaders about honesty and truth in the workplace? The first thing, if I were to give a piece of advice, is taking into account what we've talked about last week. Is you've got to wrap your honesty and truth in care, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I care for my team, because I want to see them all do their best, because I want to see them grow. I need to be direct and honest with them.
Yeah.
I need to be able to tell each individual when they're doing great. And I need to be able to tell people honestly when things aren't going well, with the mindset of, hey, things aren't going well. Let's talk about how to get things on track, because you can do that. Because ultimately, you want everybody on your team, in your organization to succeed.
Yeah.
And if you want everybody on your team to succeed, then again, it's the power of the transformational leader. It's, yes, the transformational leader understands that it's all about team dynamics, but then they also realize that every team is made of individuals,
Yeah.
and that you have to do some work on the individual level and you have to do some work on the team level. Honesty and truth is the one that has to be done on both levels. You have to deal with people honestly and truthfully as individuals. And sometimes you have to go to a team and tell them this marketing piece just doesn't hit the mark.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. Let's dig in a little bit more. Let's rehash some of these ideas. Let's bring some new ideas to the table. Do we need to bring someone else in the room that can help us to push this over the finish line? But we've got to wrap our honesty and truth in care. Ryan, what advice would you give for a leader to help them improve in delivering that honesty and truth?
Well, I mean, this you got to realize the reason you're in business is to make money, right? So if you're not being direct and honest, not only are you not caring about the individual, but you're costing your company potentially a lot of, I mean, unsurmountable amounts of money. I'll give a good example is, in where I work is we oftentimes don't look at the honest truth of like how much a guy is making versus how much we're spending on him, and then how many times he's got to go back and redo a job. And if we're not being honest about those numbers because we're too afraid to look under the hood and see, oh my God, we're losing a lot of money here because we don't want to know the truth. And then we don't want to have that honest conversation with, bro, I know you're working hard, but you got to work harder. Like those are hard conversations to have. And those are hard realities to come by. But if you're not willing to face the truth yourself as a leader, you could be potentially costing your company and yourself a lot of money. It's more expensive to be to live in a lie and to keep sugarcoating everything than it is just to face the truth head on.
Wow.
That's good. How about you, Philip? What advice might you give?
I would say for leaders, I always think about this phrase, you can attract more flies with honey than with vinegar. And I think that's a key thing in terms of interacting with people. There is, of course, a benefit to being direct and being straightforward and honest with people, but there's also the side of using tact to be able to do that. Because if you come at people a little too harshly and maybe even make it a bit of a personal attack, let's say they're not meeting a certain metric or whatever it is, and you tell them, you don't really want to be here, do you? Those types of personal attacks based on, what you're seeing from their work, you're ascribing a motive to them that they may not have, and so you don't want to go down that road. It's better to find ways to tactfully but truthfully communicate with them. That way they're not going to put up that wall of defense because they're offended at what you said. So definitely work on tact, but also honesty and truthfulness within that tact. So,
And then I'd probably say the last reality of the group is to realize that you're communicating in honesty, no matter how well you do it, no matter how much you try proper tact and everything, there will be those out there who just don't respond well.
very true.
You have to just
Very true.
accept the fact that you can evaluate how you delivered that truth and honesty, but recognize that everybody's not going to respond well. And therefore, you have to just accept that with all of the other, and you have to keep going forward as a leader.
Yep.
Remember, it's your job to lead the team, drive it to its goals, and let it accomplish what it's meant to accomplish. And sometimes that may mean these hard conversations that don't end right away, but you have to carry it on a little bit further to bring it to resolution. Well, we're glad that you guys have stopped by and listened to us chat a little bit about this. You can listen to this podcast on your favorite streaming platform and also on YouTube. One other thing I want to remind you about is our course, Beyond Day One Essential Skills for Professional Success. This course is designed to help young professionals and those who are just entering the workplace or those who've been in the workplace and need a reminder about the etiquette necessary to succeed in the workplace. And I tell you, etiquette has dropped off in a lot of workplaces, and you could see great success by bringing etiquette back into your environment and everybody to know where they stand. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. I'm David. He's Phil. That's Ryan. And we are out.